The Arabic flowed like honey from his mouth, each syllable dripping with contempt. These people wouldn't know real culture if it danced in front of them wearing bells. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I kept my eyes on my phone, fingers steady as I typed, understanding every poisonous word. Karim, my fiancé of 2 years, didn't know I spoke Arabic. He didn't know I spoke 7 languages fluently. He didn't know much about me at all, really, beyond the carefully constructed persona I'd presented when we met at that museum fundraiser in Boston. "What are you saying?" giggled Monica, his colleague from the architecture firm, leaning closer to him on our Italian leather sofa. "It sounds so exotic." Karim's laugh was warm, charming, the same laugh that had first caught my attention across a crowded gallery. "Just commenting on the decor choices," he said in English, gesturing at the Moroccan lanterns hanging in our living room, lanterns I'd personally selected from a souk in Marrakesh during a diplomatic mission 3 years ago. Very tourist-friendly. More laughter from his friends. Marcus from accounting, Jenny from design, and Robert, his best friend and partner at the firm. They'd become regulars at our townhouse in Back Bay, dropping by for wine and conversation, always leaving their coats draped carelessly over the antique chair I'd brought back from Damascus, always treating our home like an extension of their office. "I mean, it's pretty," Monica continued, her voice honeyed with that particular brand of condescension I'd learned to recognize in my line of work. "Very Pier 1, imports chic." I looked up from my phone, offered a small smile. "I'm glad you like it. More wine?" "Oh, let me," Karim said quickly, rising from the sofa with the fluid grace that had initially attracted me. He moved to the bar cart, a genuine 1920s piece I'd acquired at an estate sale in Beirut, and began pouring. As he did, he muttered something else in Arabic, so quick and casual that his friends barely noticed. But I did. The fool smiles while I insult her home. Typical American ignorance. My hand tightened imperceptibly around my phone. I'd been drafting an email to the State Department about next month's Cultural Exchange Summit in Geneva, but now I set the device down carefully on the side table. The same table where, hidden in a locked drawer, sat my diplomatic credentials, my security clearances, and documentation of my role as the youngest cultural ambassador in the North American division. "You know what's funny?" Robert said, accepting his wine glass from Karim. "I was telling Karim just yesterday. You're so different from his usual type." "Oh?" I kept my voice light, curious. This was new territory. "Yeah, he usually goes for more." Robert paused, searching for words while Karim's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Sophisticated women. No offense." "None taken." I lied smoothly. Monica jumped in, perhaps trying to soften the blow. "I think what Robert means is that you're more down to earth. Real. Not pretentious like those career women who are always jetting off somewhere, acting like they're so important." I nodded slowly, thinking of the 17 countries I'd visited in the past year alone. The private meetings with ministers and cultural attachés. The negotiations I'd led to return stolen artifacts to their countries of origin. The 3 languages I'd simultaneously translated during a crisis summit in Dubai. "I appreciate being real," I said simply. Karim returned to the sofa, settling beside me with a possessive hand on my knee. To his friends, it looked affectionate. I felt it for what it was, a claim of ownership, a subtle assertion of control. He'd been doing it more frequently lately, these small gestures that marked territory. "Emma's perfect for me," he told the group, squeezing my knee. "Simple, uncomplicated. After years of high-maintenance relationships, it's refreshing." Simple. The word hung in the air like smoke. I was many things. A master's degree from Georgetown in international relations, fluent in Arabic, French, Mandarin, Russian, Portuguese, Farsi, and Spanish. The lead negotiator who'd helped broker the return of the Mesopotamian tablets from private collections to Iraqi museums. The woman who'd stood in the Oval Office and received a commendation from the president herself. But simple? Never. How did you two meet again? Jenny asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. She was the kindest of Karim's friends, the one who sometimes seemed uncomfortable with the casual cruelty that peppered their conversations. Museum fundraiser, Karim answered before I could. Emma was serving hors d'oeuvres. I let the lie stand, watching him embroider the story. In truth, I'd been the keynote speaker that evening, discussing the importance of cultural preservation in conflict zones. But I'd been tired, exhausted from 3 months of back-to-back negotiations in the Middle East, and when Karim had approached me afterward, charming and attentive, I'd made a split-second decision. I'd let him believe I was just another caterer, curious to see how he'd treat someone he perceived as beneath his social station. He'd been attentive, sweet even. He'd gotten my number, called the next day, taken me to dinner at a restaurant where he'd made a point of speaking Arabic to the staff, translating for me with patient condescension. I'd found it amusing at first, this elaborate game of pretend. I'd told myself I'd reveal the truth after a few dates. But then weeks became months, and I'd started to see the other sides of him. The way he spoke to waiters, the comments he made about his less educated clients, the subtle superiority that colored every interaction with people he deemed inferior. And I'd decided to wait, to see how deep it went. Now, 2 years later, I understood exactly who I'd agreed to marry. She was so shy, Karim continued, warming to his fabricated story. Wouldn't even make eye contact. I had to work to get her to talk to me. Marcus laughed. And now you can't get her to stop, right? Actually, Emma's quite quiet, Karim said, that hand still on my knee. She mostly listens, which is fine. I talk enough for both of us. More laughter. I smiled along, the dutiful fiancé who knew her place. My phone buzzed. A message from Director Chen at the Cultural Affairs Bureau. Summit prep call tomorrow, 6 a.m. Ambassador Hassan wants your input on the artifact repatriation protocols. Your proposal impressed him. Ambassador Hassan. The same man whose cultural center Karim had designed 2 years ago, a project he'd used to launch his firm to international prominence. Karim loved to tell people how he'd brought authentic Middle Eastern design to Boston, never knowing that every detail he'd implemented had been reviewed and approved by a committee that included me, operating under my official capacity. Earth to Emma. Monica's voice cut through my thoughts. We were asking about the wedding plans. I looked up, tucking my phone away. Still deciding on a venue. Nothing's good enough for her, Karim said with exaggerated patience. But there was an edge beneath it. I've shown her 10 places, beautiful venues, but she keeps finding problems. I just want it to be right, I said softly. The truth was more complicated. 3 months ago, Karim had suggested the Fairmont Copley Plaza. A beautiful venue, undoubtedly, but also the site where I'd hosted a state dinner for visiting cultural ministers just last year. I couldn't exactly explain that without revealing everything, so I'd invented concerns about the lighting, the acoustics, anything to delay. Maybe somewhere more exotic, Robert suggested. You could do a destination wedding? Morocco, maybe? Karim's family would love that. Karim stiffened almost imperceptibly beside me. My family doesn't travel much, he said quickly. Another lie. His family had stopped traveling to visit him after a falling out 3 years ago. Something about Karim's lifestyle choices and his rejection of family expectations. He'd told me they were traditional and didn't understand modern life. I'd learned through my own discreet channels that they'd caught him in several compromising situations and had essentially cut him off financially, forcing him to build his architecture firm from scratch. He'd presented it to me as being self-made, an immigrant success story. The reality was messier, but I'd let him maintain his narrative. In my line of work, I'd learned that people's lies often told you more about them than their truths. "What about right here?" Jenny suggested, gesturing around our living room. "Intimate, personal. You could do the garden, Emma. It's gorgeous back there." "The garden," I repeated softly. The garden that I'd spent 2 years cultivating, filling it with plants from every region I'd worked in. Damascus roses, Persian lilac, Lebanese cedar saplings. A living map of my actual life, hidden in plain sight. Karim had never asked about any of it, had simply enjoyed the beauty without curiosity about its origins. "Too small," Karim dismissed. "I'm thinking at least 200 guests. My professional connections alone are important," I finished for him. "I understand." He smiled at me, that charming smile that had first captured my attention. "You always understand, Habibti. That's what I love about you." Habibti, Arabic for my love. He used the term often, sprinkling his speech with Arabic phrases the way other people used French, as a marker of sophistication, of worldliness. He had no idea how often he revealed his true thoughts in these linguistic flourishes, never imagining that I caught every nuance, every subtle insult, every moment of casual contempt. "More wine," Marcus announced, draining his glass. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story." As Karim rose to play host again, I excused myself. "Restroom," I murmured, slipping away from the gathering. But I didn't go to the bathroom. Instead, I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor to my private office, the room Karim never entered because I'd told him it was my crafting space where I made jewelry to sell at local markets. Another lie he'd accepted without question because it fit his narrative of who I was. The door locked behind me with a soft click. I pressed my thumb to the biometric scanner hidden beneath the light switch, and the far wall panel slid open silently, revealing my actual workspace. 3 monitors flickered to life, displaying secure feeds from my various ongoing projects: the summit in Geneva, the artifact negotiations with Turkey, the cultural sensitivity training program I was developing for Fortune 500 companies, my official email, which carried the .gov designation Karim had never seen. I pulled up the secure messaging system and typed quickly to Director Chen. "Confirm 6 a.m. call. Hassan proposal ready for review. Also requesting security clearance update on Karim Mansour. Fiancé status requires new vetting." The response came within seconds. "Understood. FBI running background check. Results by Friday. You sure about this, Emma? It's not too late to extract." Extract. The word they used when an undercover operative needed to disappear. But I wasn't undercover. Not officially. I'd simply allowed a personal relationship to develop under false pretenses, and now I needed to know who I was really dealing with. "Running full check," I typed back. "Personal matter. Will advise." I pulled up the file I'd started compiling 6 months ago, when Karim's casual cruelties had begun to crystallize into something more concerning. Screenshots of texts, recordings of conversations, documentation of the growing gap between the man he presented to the world and the man he was becoming in private. Nothing illegal. Nothing that would interest law enforcement. Just the slow revelation of character. The kind that happened when someone thought they were safe from judgment. My phone buzzed again. A message in Arabic from my colleague, Ambassador Hassan himself. "Looking forward to your presentation next week, Dr. Reeves. Your insight into cross-cultural communication has been invaluable." The minister is particularly impressed with your linguistic capabilities. Dr. Emma Reeves. My full title, earned through years of study and fieldwork. The name that appeared on diplomatic rosters, cultural exchange documents, and State Department briefings. The identity that Karim had never thought to Google because why would Emma, who makes jewelry and can't land a real job, need to be investigated? I heard laughter floating up from downstairs, Karim's voice rising above the others. He was telling a story, probably another anecdote designed to showcase his brilliance or generosity, peppered with Arabic phrases that his friends would find exotic and sophisticated. I wondered what he'd say if he knew. If he understood that the woman he'd spent 2 years subtly demeaning had negotiated directly with foreign ministers. That the simple girlfriend who nodded through his explanations of Middle Eastern culture had written the definitive paper on post-conflict cultural preservation, required reading at Georgetown and Harvard. That the fiancé he'd lied about had security clearance so high that her personnel file was accessible to fewer than 50 people in the entire federal government. The temptation to march downstairs and reveal everything was powerful. To watch his face as I spoke, fluent Arabic, correcting his grammar and his theology, exposing every lie he'd told about his background and expertise. To see the recognition dawn that he'd been patronizing someone who operated at levels he couldn't even imagine. But I'd learned patience in my work. Negotiations took time. Understanding your opponent took longer. And sometimes, the best strategy was to let people reveal themselves completely before you played your hand. I pulled up another file, this one containing the guest list for next month's Geneva summit. Karim's name was there, not as my +1, but as one of 3 architects competing for the contract to design the new International Cultural Center. A project worth $30 million, a project that would require extensive vetting and security clearances, a project whose selection committee I chaired. Karim didn't know he was competing for it yet. The RFP hadn't been publicly released, but I'd seen his firm's preliminary proposal, submitted through proper channels, completely ignorant of my involvement. It was good work. He was talented. I'd give him that. His designs showed real understanding of cultural sensitivity and architectural heritage. But talent wasn't enough for a project of this magnitude. Character mattered. Integrity mattered. The ability to work with diverse teams, to respect all cultures equally, to understand that buildings weren't just structures, but statements about how we saw each other and the world. I thought about the Arabic phrases he'd been dropping all evening. The casual racism, hidden in a language he thought was his private code. The way he'd described these people and their inability to understand culture. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from Jennifer Park, my deputy at the Cultural Affairs Bureau. Preliminary background on Mansour complete. Some interesting findings. Nothing disqualifying, but you'll want to see this. Sending encrypted file now. The file arrived seconds later. I opened it, scanning quickly. Karim Mansour had indeed built his architecture firm from nothing. That part was true. But the nothing had started after his family had cut him off for reasons that went beyond simple cultural differences. There had been a business partnership that ended badly in Lebanon, accusations of stolen design concepts, a lawsuit that had been quietly settled. Not illegal, but ethically murky. His firm's success in Boston had been built partly on his talent and partly on his willingness to present himself as an authentic voice for Middle Eastern culture, landing him clients and contracts that had gone to more established firms. He'd positioned himself as a bridge between worlds, a cultural translator, all while privately mocking the very culture he profited from. I closed the file and sat back in my chair, listening to the party sounds drifting up from below. Monica's laugh, Robert's booming voice, and Karim holding court, probably gesturing with his wine glass, spinning another story about his sophisticated life and his simple fiancé who was just happy to be along for the ride. My eyes fell on the framed photograph on my desk, the only personal item in this secret office. It showed me standing between Ambassador Hassan and the French cultural minister at last year's UNESCO summit in Paris, all of us holding champagne flutes and smiling. In the background, barely visible, was a banner announcing my keynote speech on cultural identity in the digital age. Karim had been in Paris that same week, attending a design conference. We'd had dinner one evening, and he'd told me about the boring diplomatic stuff happening across town, making jokes about stuffy bureaucrats and their meaningless ceremonies. I'd smiled and nodded, wearing my jewelry maker disguise, never mentioning that I'd been the keynote speaker he was dismissing. Another burst of laughter from downstairs, followed by Karim's voice, speaking Arabic again. This time, the words were cruder, more explicit. He was describing a client from earlier in the week, a woman who'd hired his firm to design a cultural center. He was mimicking her accent, mocking her attempts to appreciate Middle Eastern architecture, painting her as a foolish American trying to buy authenticity. I knew the woman he was describing, Mrs. Patricia Vandermeer, a wealthy philanthropist who dedicated the last decade of her life to promoting cultural understanding. She'd funded scholarships for Middle Eastern students, supported refugee resettlement programs, and was genuinely trying to create a space for cultural exchange. And Karim was tearing her apart for sport, for the entertainment of his friends in a language he thought was safe. My decision crystallized in that moment, sharp and clear. I pulled up my calendar and confirmed my attendance at next week's summit in Geneva. Then I opened a new email to the selection committee for the International Cultural Center project. As committee chair, I had the authority to modify the vetting requirements for all candidates. Recommendation for enhanced vetting process, I typed. All finalists for ICC project should undergo cultural sensitivity review, including linguistic proficiency verification and cross-cultural competency assessment. Given the nature of the project and its international significance, we need architects who don't just design for culture, but understand and respect it deeply. The new requirements would be announced next week. Karim would have to prove his cultural expertise wasn't just superficial. He'd have to demonstrate real understanding, real respect, real fluency, not just the ability to drop exotic phrases to impress his clients and friends. And somewhere in that process, he'd discover exactly who his fiancé really was. I heard footsteps on the stairs. "Emma?" Karim's voice called out. "You okay up there?" I quickly secured my monitors, the wall panels sliding silently back into place. When Karim opened the door, I hadn't locked it this time, letting him think he could always access my space. I was sitting at my craft table, wire and beads spread before me. "Just needed a break," I said, holding up a half-finished bracelet. The conversation was getting a bit boring. He grinned, coming to stand behind me, hands on my shoulders. "Yeah, they can be a lot. But they're good people, important connections." "I know." His hands moved from my shoulders to my neck. A gesture that probably felt affectionate to him, but carried an undercurrent of control. "You looked upset earlier, when Robert said that thing about my usual type." No, I understood what he meant. "You're better than those women," Karim said softly, his lips near my ear. More real, more genuine. They were all career-obsessed, always traveling, never home. You make this house a home. I let the bracelet drop to the table. What if I wanted to travel? What if I wanted a career? He laughed, squeezing my shoulders. "You? Where would you go? What would you do?" "I don't know. Maybe cultural work?" I've always been interested in different countries, different languages. "Habibti," he said, and I could hear the patronizing patience in his voice. "That world, it's competitive, political. You need connections, education, Years of experience. It's not like making jewelry or serving at parties. These are serious people doing serious work. I see. Besides, he continued, turning me in the chair to face him, I need you here. My anchor. My simple, beautiful anchor. The world out there. It's complicated. I deal with complicated all day. When I come home, I need uncomplicated. Simple. Uncomplicated. Anchor. The words he used to define me, to contain me, to keep me small and manageable. The party's winding down, he said. Come say goodbye to everyone? I followed him downstairs, playing my role perfectly. The quiet fiancé, the simple girl who was lucky to have caught such a sophisticated man. I hugged Monica and Jenny, shook hands with Marcus and Robert, smiled at their jokes and their casual dismissals. You're a lucky woman, Monica whispered to me as she pulled on her coat. Karim's going places, big places. You just hold on tight. I will, I promised. After they left, Karim and I cleaned up together. He was in a good mood, talking about the evening, the conversations, the business prospects that had been discussed. He spoke some more Arabic, comfortable and careless, describing Marcus as a useful idiot and Monica as too ambitious for her own good. I washed wine glasses and listened, cataloging every word, every phrase, every casual cruelty. You're quiet tonight, Karim observed, coming up behind me at the sink. Just tired. Too much excitement? He kissed my neck. My simple Emma, overwhelmed by big conversations and fancy people. I dried my hands carefully. Karim, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I'm smart? He blinked, surprised by the question. What? Of course. You're wonderful. That's not what I asked. He paused, considering his words carefully for once. You're smart in the ways that matter. You're emotionally intelligent. You're kind. You're good with people. In your own quiet way. But not intellectually smart. Emma, why are we having this conversation? Did someone say something? No. I'm just curious about how you see me. He pulled me close, his arms around my waist. I see a beautiful woman who makes me happy, who makes my life better, who doesn't complicate things with career drama or competitive nonsense. You're perfect for me. Even though I couldn't get hired at a museum? Even though I serve hors d'oeuvres and make jewelry? Especially because of that, he said seriously. You're real, Emma. You're not trying to be something you're not. I rested my head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat, thinking about all the layers of irony in that statement. And if I were something else? Something more? You couldn't be more than you already are, he murmured into my hair. You're exactly enough. We stood there in the kitchen, the dishwasher humming, and I felt the last piece of my decision click into place. Not anger. I'd moved past anger weeks ago. Not hurt. I'd learned long ago not to let other people's limitations wound me. Just clarity. I love you, I said, testing the words, wondering if they'd ever been true. I love you too, Habibti, my simple, perfect Emma. That night, as Karim slept beside me, I lay awake thinking about the summit next week, the selection committee, the moment when Karim would walk into that conference room expecting to pitch his design to a panel of strangers, the moment when he'd see me at the head of the table, when he'd hear me speak fluent Arabic, correcting his proposal's cultural inaccuracies, when he'd learn that Dr. Emma Reeves, cultural ambassador, had been sitting beside him all along. I thought about the termination papers in my office, not for his job, but for our engagement. Drafted carefully, reviewed by lawyers, waiting for the right moment. I thought about the apartment I'd already secured, paid for in cash, ready for when I needed to leave. The one Karim knew nothing about, in the building next to the embassy, where I could disappear into my real life without complication. But mostly, I thought about the exact moment of revelation, the instant when everything would flip, when the power dynamic would invert, when Karim would have to reckon with the fact that the woman he'd spent 2 years diminishing was so far beyond his reach that he'd never even seen the gap. My phone buzzed quietly on the nightstand. Another message from Director Chen. Geneva Summit confirmed. You're presenting the ICC project overview to all candidates. Should be interesting. I typed back in the darkness. Very interesting. I'll need the full dossier on all 3 architects by Monday. Including Mansour? Especially Mansour. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, I mentally reviewed my presentation, the one I'd give with Karim in the audience. The one where I'd discuss the importance of authentic cultural respect, of understanding beyond surface knowledge, of ensuring that people who claim to bridge cultures actually understood those cultures deeply. The one where I'd speak in 7 languages, switching effortlessly between them, demonstrating the kind of fluency and cultural competence that couldn't be faked. Beside me, Karim stirred, mumbling something in Arabic in his sleep. Something about designs and victories and showing them all. Yes, I whispered into the darkness, in perfect Arabic. Show them all. The irony was complete. Tomorrow I would continue playing my role. The simple fiancé who struggled to understand his sophisticated world. The woman who needed his explanations, his patience, his benevolent guidance. But soon, very soon, the curtain would rise on the real performance. And Karim Mansour would learn that sometimes the person you underestimate is the only person in the room who truly sees you. I thought about my father, who'd taught me that knowledge was power only when wielded at the right moment, who'd shown me that sometimes the best strategy was to let people think they'd won while you quietly positioned all the pieces. He'd been a diplomat too, before cancer took him. He'd taught me 7 languages by the time I was 16. He'd shown me how to navigate complex cultural waters, how to read people, how to wait for exactly the right moment to act. Patience, Emma, he used to say. Let them think they understand you. Let them think they've got you figured out. And then, when it matters most, show them what they missed. I'd carried those lessons into every negotiation, every diplomatic mission, every tense conference room where I'd had to prove myself among people who underestimated me because of my age or gender or unassuming appearance. But this was different. This was personal. This was about a man who'd claimed to love me while simultaneously believing I was less than him, who'd built a relationship on a foundation of superiority, who'd needed me to be small so he could feel large. I knew I could walk away quietly, call off the engagement with minimal drama, disappear into my real life, and let him continue believing whatever he wanted about simple Emma who couldn't hack it in the real world. But I'd spent 2 years building up documentation, 2 years watching and waiting. 2 years allowing him to reveal exactly who he was when he thought no one important was watching. And now, with Geneva approaching, with the ICC project hanging in the balance, with Karim's professional future dependent on a committee I chaired, the pieces had finally aligned. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge was emotional, messy, counterproductive. I was doing this because someone who mocked the very cultures they claim to represent, who used cultural knowledge as a weapon of superiority, who saw people as either useful or beneath notice, that person shouldn't be designing spaces meant to bring cultures together. And if, in the process of protecting the integrity of a $30 million international project, I happened to reveal to my fiancé exactly how far below me he'd always been, well, that was just an added benefit. I felt Karim's arm drape across my waist in sleep, possessive even in unconsciousness. The arm of a man who believed he'd found his perfect partner, simple, uncomplicated, grateful for his attention. I closed my eyes and started counting down. 7 days until Geneva. 7 days until Karim walked into that conference room. 7 days until everything changed. The game wasn't over. In fact, it had barely begun. And unlike Karim, I knew all the rules. Monday morning arrived with rain drumming against the windows. I was already dressed for my 6 a.m. call with Director Chen when Karim stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You're up early," he mumbled, reaching for the coffee I'd already brewed. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd be productive." I gestured at my laptop, which displayed a perfectly innocent jewelry design website. My actual work, 3 encrypted video conferences scheduled back-to-back, was running on the secure tablet hidden in my messenger bag. "I've got a big week, too," Karim said, pouring his coffee. "Mystery client wants to see the firm. Very hush-hush. Could be huge." I knew exactly which mystery client he meant. The ICC Selection Committee's preliminary interviews were scheduled for Wednesday. 3 firms, back-to-back appointments, all believing they were meeting with a standard review board. "That sounds exciting," I said neutrally. "It's international work. Real prestige stuff." He sat across from me, and I caught the glint of ambition in his eyes. This could put us on the map globally, not just designing for Boston's wannabe cultured elite, but actual international projects. "Wannabe cultured elite?" I repeated softly. He waved dismissively. "You know what I mean. People who think buying some imported furniture makes them worldly. Present company excluded, of course." "Of course?" "This project, though, if we get it, it's the real thing. A cultural center in Geneva that'll host actual diplomats, ambassadors, important people who understand what real culture looks like." I sipped my coffee, watching him over the rim. "Do you ever worry that you might not be qualified for something like that?" Karim laughed, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. "Emma, I've been designing culturally significant buildings for 5 years. I speak Arabic. I understand Middle Eastern architecture better than most people in this country. I'm exactly qualified for this. But speaking one language and understanding one culture, is that enough for an international project?" His expression shifted, a flicker of irritation crossing his features. "Where is this coming from? Since when do you question my professional abilities?" "I'm not questioning. I'm just asking." "Well, don't." He stood abruptly, coffee sloshing in his mug. "You don't understand this world, Emma. No offense, but jewelry making and serving canapés doesn't exactly give you insight into international architecture and cultural diplomacy." I nodded slowly, letting the words settle between us. "You're right. What do I know?" His expression softened, guilt flickering across his face. "I'm sorry. That was harsh. I'm just stressed about this pitch. It means everything to the firm." "I understand." He kissed the top of my head, a gesture that felt more patronizing than affectionate. "I'll be home late tonight. Another prep session with the team. Don't wait up." After he left, I allowed myself a small smile. Then I pulled out my secure tablet and joined the video conference already in progress. Director Chen's face filled the screen, her expression all business. "Dr. Reeves, good morning." "Director, sorry for the delay." "No problem. Ambassador Hassan is joining us momentarily." She glanced at something off-screen. "I have to ask, Emma, are you sure about this approach? Once you're visible at the Geneva summit, there's no going back to anonymity. Your cover, if we can call it that, will be completely blown." "I know. And Mansour will be there. He'll see everything." "That's the point." Chen sighed. "I've worked with you for 6 years, and I've never seen you bring personal feelings into professional decisions. Make sure this is about the project's integrity, not about—" "It's both," I interrupted. "And that's okay. Karim's proposal is good, But his cultural competency is questionable. He's built a career presenting himself as a cultural expert while privately mocking the very cultures he claims to represent. That's not just personally offensive, it's professionally disqualifying for a project of this magnitude. Ambassador Hassan's face appeared in a second window. Dr. Reeves, Director Chen, shall we begin? For the next 90 minutes, we reviewed the ICC project requirements. The building would house rotating cultural exhibitions, diplomatic meeting spaces, and educational facilities. It needed to honor multiple cultural traditions without favoring any single perspective. The architect would work directly with cultural attachés from 43 countries. The candidates must demonstrate not just design capability, I explained, but genuine cultural sensitivity and knowledge. We're not building a museum, we're building a space for living, active cultural exchange. Your enhanced vetting requirements, Hassan said, pulling up my proposal. Linguistic proficiency verification. Cross-cultural competency assessment. These are unusual for an architecture selection. This is an unusual project, I replied. We've had too many instances of Western architects designing culturally sensitive spaces that end up being caricatures. Beautiful caricatures, but caricatures nonetheless. We need someone who understands culture from the inside, not as decoration. And you believe the current candidates may not meet this standard? I chose my words carefully. I believe all three firms have technical merit, but I want to ensure they also have the depth of understanding this project requires. The vetting process will reveal that. Chen jumped in. Dr. Reeves has designed a comprehensive assessment. Each candidate will present to the full committee, including representatives from our partner nations. They'll be expected to discuss their cultural philosophy, demonstrate their knowledge, and respond to questions in multiple languages if they've claimed multilingual capabilities. Hassan smiled. In other words, we're calling their bluff. We're verifying their credentials, I corrected. Same as we would for any diplomatic posting. After the call ended, I had 20 minutes before my next meeting. I pulled up the files Jennifer Park had compiled on all three architectural firms, Morrison and Associates, a firm out of London with extensive European experience, but limited work in Middle Eastern or Asian contexts. Their proposal showed promise but lacked depth in understanding non-Western spatial concepts. Chen Architectural Group, based in Singapore, led by Susan Chen, no relation to Director Chen. Impressive portfolio spanning multiple Asian countries. Strong cultural credentials. They were actually my preferred choice, though I'd let the process play out fairly. And then, Mansour Design Collective, Karim's firm. The proposal was elegant, drawing on traditional Islamic geometric patterns and spatial concepts. On paper, it looked perfect. The portfolio showed his best work, the Cultural Center for Ambassador Hassan, several mosque renovations, a beautiful library in Dearborn. But I'd also seen the raw files, the initial drafts, the internal communications. I'd seen where Karim had overridden his partner's more culturally sensitive suggestions, where he'd simplified complex cultural concepts to make them more palatable to Western clients, where he'd chosen aesthetic appeal over cultural accuracy. And I'd heard him, in our own home, mock the very clients who trusted him to represent their culture with respect. My phone buzzed. A text from Karim. Forgot to ask. Can you pick up my suit from the dry cleaner? Need it for Wednesday's meeting. You're the best. I stared at the message. The suit he'd wear to pitch the ICC project. The suit I'd pick up like a good, helpful fiancé who had nothing better to do with her time. I typed back, of course, good luck with your prep. Then I opened my calendar and reviewed my own schedule for Wednesday. The ICC preliminary presentations were set for 2 p.m., 3:30 p.m., and 5 p.m. Karim's firm had the final slot. By design, I'd wanted him to watch the other presentations, to see the caliber of competition before facing the committee himself, before facing me. My next call was with the State Department's legal team, reviewing the protocols for the summit. An hour of bureaucratic minutiae, but necessary. Then a call with the French Cultural Ministry about coordinating exhibition schedules. Then lunch at my desk, reviewing briefing documents. By the time I emerged from my office at 3 p.m., I'd conducted 4 video conferences in 3 languages and signed off on 2 major cultural exchange agreements. I felt energized, alive in the way I only felt when fully engaged in my real work. Then I remembered I needed to pick up Karim's suit. The dry cleaner was in our neighborhood, a small shop run by Mrs. Kim, who I'd gotten to know over the past 2 years. She smiled when I walked in. "Emma, here for Mr. Mansour's suit?" "Yes, please." She retrieved it, carefully wrapped. "Big occasion?" "An important meeting for his firm." "He's very talented," Mrs. Kim said, ringing up the charge. "My nephew wants to be an architect." I told him, "Look at Mr. Mansour. Came here with nothing, built a whole business. The American dream." I swiped my card, thinking about the complicated reality behind that simple narrative. "He's worked hard," I said, which was true enough. Walking home with the suit draped over my arm, I felt the weight of the double life I'd been living. Every errand like this, every mundane task, every moment of playing the supportive fiancé, it all felt like a performance now, one that was about to reach its final act. My phone rang. Jennifer Park. "Emma, just wanted to give you a heads up. The background check on Mansour flagged something interesting." "Go ahead." "Remember that business dispute in Lebanon we mentioned?" I dug deeper. Turns out the design concepts he was accused of stealing? They were actually from his former partner's wife, a Syrian architect who'd fled to Lebanon. She'd shared preliminary designs with your fiancé in confidence. He filed them as his own work and cut her out of the project and the profits. I stopped walking. "Do we have documentation?" "Enough to be concerning. The lawsuit was settled with a non-disclosure agreement, but we pulled the original filings. The concepts he claimed as his own form the foundation of his signature style, the same style that got him noticed in Boston." "And the Syrian architect?" "Still in Lebanon. Still designing, but she never got the recognition she deserved. Mansour's theft set her career back years." I resumed walking, my mind processing this new information. It wasn't just casual racism and private mockery. It was deeper. A pattern of using culture as a commodity, taking from others, and building success on appropriation and theft. "Send me everything," I said. "I want the full file before Wednesday." "You're going to use it?" "I'm going to make sure the committee has complete information about all candidates. What they do with it is up to them." That evening, Karim came home energized from his prep session. He'd been practicing his presentation, refining his pitch, getting ready for what he clearly saw as his big break. "We're going to nail this," he announced, pouring himself a celebratory scotch even though the meeting was still 2 days away. "Robert thinks our proposal is the strongest. Marcus ran the numbers. The profit margin on this could fund our expansion into Europe." "That's wonderful," I said from the couch, where I was supposedly watching television but actually reviewing the Syrian architect's stolen designs on my tablet. "You should see the presentation deck we put together. Visual storytelling at its finest. We open with this quote from Khalil Gibran about culture and architecture really sets the tone." "In English or Arabic?" I asked casually. "English, obviously. It's an international committee. They'll want everything accessible." "But you'll demonstrate your Arabic fluency, won't you? Since that's part of your cultural expertise?" Karim paused, his glass halfway to his lips. "If appropriate. Why are you so interested in the presentation?" "I just want you to succeed." He studied me for a moment, something flickering in his expression that might have been suspicion. But then he shook it off. too confident to imagine his simple Emma could pose any challenge. "I will succeed," he said. "This is what I've been building toward. Everything's finally coming together." I nodded, watching him sip his scotch, watching him bask in his anticipated triumph. I wondered if he'd ever really seen me, not the mask I'd worn, but the actual woman beneath it. Whether in 2 years of living together, sleeping together, planning a life together, he'd ever once looked closely enough to notice the inconsistencies in my story, the jewelry that was far too sophisticated for a hobbyist, the books on my shelves, diplomatic memoirs, cultural theory, international relations texts, that I supposedly just found interesting. The times I'd corrected his Arabic pronunciation, then played it off as lucky guessing. The way I navigated social situations with ease, reading rooms and managing conversations with practiced skill. All the little signs that I was more than I appeared to be. But he'd never looked, because he'd never imagined there was anything more to see. "I picked up your suit," I said, breaking the silence. "You're amazing. What would I do without you?" "I don't know. What would you do?" He came to sit beside me, pulling me against his side. "Probably fall apart. You keep me grounded. Keep me focused on what matters." "And what matters?" "Success. Building something that lasts. Making a name for myself in this world." He kissed my temple. "And coming home to you. My constant. My anchor." There it was again. Anchor. The metaphor that meant I held him in place while he sailed wherever he wanted, secure in the knowledge that I'd be waiting. "Karim," I said carefully, "what if I wanted to sail somewhere too?" He laughed softly. "Where would you go? You've got everything you need right here." "Do I?" He pulled back to look at me, and for a moment I thought he might actually hear what I was trying to say. That he might pause and wonder and ask real questions about who I was beneath the role I played. But then he just smiled, that indulgent smile I'd come to know so well. "You're having doubts about the wedding again. Emma, we've talked about this. Cold feet are normal, but we're good together. You know we are. Because I'm simple, and you're complicated. Because we balance each other," he corrected. "I bring excitement and ambition. You bring stability and peace. It works." I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. "What if I told you I speak Arabic?" "What?" "Arabic. What if I spoke it fluently, along with 6 other languages?" He laughed, genuinely amused. "Emma, Habibti, where is this coming from? Did you download one of those language apps?" "That's sweet, but I'm serious." "Okay." He humored me, still smiling. "Say something in Arabic." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and made a choice. Not to reveal everything, not yet, but to crack the door open just slightly, to see if he'd notice. In perfect fluent Arabic, I said, "I understand every word you've said in front of me, every joke about me, every insult about others, every moment you thought you were safe because you thought I was ignorant." Karim stared at me. Then he laughed again, but it was uncertain this time. "What did you say? I mean, that sounded... Was that actually Arabic?" "What do you think it was?" "I don't... Emma, where did you learn that? That was actually good. Did you take a class?" "Something like that." He was looking at me differently now, a hint of confusion in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me? We could have practiced together. I could have helped you." "Could you?" "Of course. I mean, you've got a good accent. But native speakers can always tell when." "When what?" I asked in Arabic. "When someone isn't truly fluent. When they're performing rather than speaking from genuine knowledge." This time, he heard the fluency. Really heard it. His expression shifted from amused indulgence to genuine surprise. How long have you been studying?" "Studying?" I switched back to English. Is that what you think this is? Emma, I don't understand. Why are you being so cryptic? I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation, of the games, of everything. I think I'm going to bed early. Big day tomorrow. Wait. He caught my hand. What's going on? You're acting strange. The Arabic. The questions about my work. The. What's happening here? Nothing's happening. I'm just tired. Is this about what Robert said? About you not being my usual type? His grip on my hand tightened. Because that was just him being an idiot. You know, I don't care about that stuff. Education, career, whatever. I love you for who you are. And who am I, Karim? You're Emma. My Emma. Simple, genuine. Simple, I repeated. Right. I pulled my hand free and went upstairs, leaving him confused in the living room. I heard him call after me, heard him start to follow, then stop. He'd give me space, let me have my mood, confident that by morning everything would be back to normal. He had no idea that normal was about to explode. In my office, I locked the door and pulled up the complete file on the ICC project. The presentation schedule, the committee roster, the evaluation criteria, everything Karim would face on Wednesday. My phone buzzed with a message from Ambassador Hassan. Looking forward to Wednesday's presentations. Your evaluation framework is exactly what this project needs. Whoever we choose will have earned it through merit, not just pretty pictures. I typed back. That's the goal. May the best candidate win. Another message came through, this time from Susan Chen, the architect from Singapore. We'd worked together on a previous project in Bangkok, and she knew exactly who I was. Emma, I hear you're chairing the ICC Selection Committee. Looking forward to finally working together officially. May the best proposal win, and may the vetting process catch anyone who doesn't deserve to be there. I smiled at that. Susan understood the importance of authentic cultural competency. She'd fought her own battles against architects who appropriated Asian design elements without understanding their significance. A third message appeared, this one from Director Chen. Final briefing packets ready for committee review, all background checks complete. Mansour's file is thorough. You'll have everything you need to make an informed recommendation. I pulled up the file and spent the next 2 hours reading. Every detail of Karim's career, his education, his business practices, his personal history. The stolen designs from the Syrian architect. The exaggerated credentials he'd used to land early contracts. The clients he'd misled about his cultural expertise. The pattern of appropriation and exploitation that had built his success. It was damning. Not illegal, but ethically bankrupt. And in 2 days, it would all be on display for a committee that included representatives from the very cultures he'd been mocking and exploiting. Around midnight, I heard Karim come upstairs. He paused outside my office door but didn't knock. After a moment, his footsteps continued to our bedroom. I stayed in my office, reviewing documents, preparing for Wednesday, feeling the anticipation build. This was it. The culmination of 2 years of watching and waiting and documenting. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me wondered if I was taking this too far, letting personal feelings drive professional decisions. But then I pulled up the recordings from last week's dinner party. Karim's voice, speaking Arabic, mocking the very people who would sit on Wednesday's committee. Describing them as cultural tourists and pretenders, laughing about how easy it was to impress them with superficial knowledge. The guilt evaporated. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. This was ensuring that someone who'd built a career on cultural appropriation and casual racism didn't get to design a building meant to celebrate cultural understanding. And if, in the process, Karim learned that the woman he'd underestimated for 2 years was actually the architect of his professional judgment, well, that was just poetic justice. I shut down my computers and finally went to bed. Karim was asleep, or pretending to be. I lay beside him in the darkness, counting down the hours until Wednesday, until the moment when everything would change. 48 hours. That's all that remained of the life we'd been living. 48 hours until Karim Mansour walked into that conference room and discovered who his fiancé really was. I closed my eyes and smiled in the darkness. The performance was almost over. Soon, the curtain would rise on reality. Wednesday arrived with crystalline clarity. I dressed carefully in my navy diplomatic suit, the one with the State Department pin on the lapel. Karim was already gone, having left early for final preparations. At 4:45 p.m., I stood outside Conference Room A at the International Cultural Center's temporary offices. Inside, Karim was finishing his presentation setup. The other two firms had already presented. Morrison's had been competent but uninspired. Susan Chen's had been exceptional. Now came the finale. I smoothed my suit jacket and pushed open the door. Karim looked up from his laptop. Smile ready for the committee member he expected. The smile froze when he saw me. "Emma? What are you doing here?" I walked to the head of the table where my nameplate waited. Dr. Emma Reeves, Cultural Ambassador, Committee Chair. "I'm here for your presentation, Mr. Mansour." The color drained from his face. "This is... your..." The door opened again. Ambassador Hassan entered, followed by Director Chen and 4 other committee members. They took their seats, greeting me in Arabic, French, and Mandarin. I responded fluently in each language, watching Karim's world tilt on its axis. "Shall we begin?" I said in English, settling into my chair. "Mr. Mansour, please proceed with your presentation." He stood frozen, laptop remote in hand, staring at me like I was a stranger, which I suppose I was. "Mr. Mansour?" I prompted. "We have your proposal materials. We're ready when you are." Emma, I don't understand." "Dr. Reeves," I corrected gently. "In professional settings, please use my title. And there's nothing to understand. You're here to present your firm's proposal for the International Cultural Center. We're here to evaluate it. Please begin." He stumbled through his presentation. The confidence I'd seen him rehearse completely shattered. His words caught and stuttered. His transitions were rough. When he tried to speak Arabic to demonstrate his cultural fluency, his accent, which had always seemed sophisticated to his friends, sounded crude and rehearsed compared to the native speakers in the room. Ambassador Hassan asked him a question in Arabic about the prayer room design. Karim answered, but his response was elementary, full of errors. Hassan's eyebrow raised slightly. "Interesting," Hassan said, switching to English. "Your proposal suggests deep familiarity with Islamic spatial concepts, but your explanation lacks nuance. Can you elaborate?" Karim tried. He really did. But without his usual audience of impressed Americans, his knowledge showed its limitations. Surface level, appropriated, incomplete. I let the questioning continue for 30 minutes before I spoke. "Mr. Mansour, I have some concerns about your cultural competency claims." I pulled up a document on my tablet. "You've presented yourself as an expert in Middle Eastern architecture and culture, yet our background check revealed some troubling patterns." "Background check?" His voice cracked. "Standard procedure for projects of this magnitude." I projected the image onto the main screen. "These designs? The ones that launched your firm to prominence? Do you recognize them?" "Those are mine. My signature style." "Actually, they belong to Layla Haddad, a Syrian architect whose work you appropriated in Lebanon 6 years ago. We've verified this with Ms. Haddad directly. She's provided us with her original sketches, dated 2 months before you filed them as your own." The room went silent. Karim's face transformed from confused to stricken. "Furthermore," I continued, my voice steady and professional, We have recordings from multiple sources documenting your pattern of mocking the very cultures you claim to represent, including statements made in my presence, in Arabic, believing I couldn't understand. I played a 30-second clip. His voice, from our dinner party, describing committee members as cultural tourists and easy marks. Ambassador Hassan's expression went cold. Director Chen leaned back, arms folded. The other committee members exchanged glances. This project requires genuine cultural understanding and respect, I said. Not performance, not appropriation, not contempt hidden behind language barriers. You've built a career on surface-level knowledge and stolen concepts. That's not what we need here. Karim found his voice finally. You let me believe. For 2 years. You let yourself believe. I corrected. I never lied about who I was. I simply didn't correct your assumptions. You saw what you wanted to see. A simple woman who made you feel superior. You never asked questions. Never looked deeper. Never imagined I could be anything more than what fit your narrative. This is personal, he said desperately, looking at the committee. She's my fiancé. This is revenge. Was your fiancé? I interrupted, pulling the engagement ring from my pocket and setting it on the table. And this isn't revenge, it's accountability. Your proposal is technically sound, but your cultural competency is fraudulent. The committee deserves to know that. I stood. The decision is yours to make. You have all the information. I'll recuse myself from the final vote given the personal connection. I looked at Karim one last time. Your presentation is complete, Mr. Mansour. Thank you for your time. I walked out, leaving him standing there, his carefully constructed world in ruins. 3 weeks later, Susan Chen won the ICC contract. Her proposal was brilliant, her cultural credentials impeccable, her integrity unquestioned. Karim's firm survived. Barely. The story of his appropriation and the recordings spread through professional circles. Clients began asking uncomfortable questions. His partners started distancing themselves. I heard through Jennifer Park that he'd moved out of our townhouse. His name had never been on the deed anyway, that he'd tried calling me 47 times before finally accepting that I was done. I threw myself into the Geneva summit, into my real work, into the life I'd paused to see if love could exist alongside truth. It couldn't. Not with someone who needed you to be small so they could feel large. My father had been right about patience, about letting people reveal themselves. But he'd also taught me something else, that who we are matters less than how we treat others when we think no one important is watching. Karim had shown me exactly who he was, and I'd shown him who I'd always been. The woman he never bothered to see. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.